around the SEC, get you ready for Sunday in the league. But before we get to any of that, as always, our Sunday edition of Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Active Wealth Management. Ford Stokes and Sam Davis are my guys over there. Get with them if this is something you're in the market for. They are also media guys. I've mentioned this before. They have a TV show called Retirement Results. It's on in Huntsville, Alabama, 10:30 a.m. on Sundays, and Columbus, Georgia at 8:30 a.m. Sundays, in addition to a radio show which can be heard on iHeartRadio in Huntsville and on AM 920 The Answer in Atlanta at 12 noon on Saturdays and 11 on Sundays. And as always, our call to action there at the bottom of the screen. Visit activewealth.com and click schedule a consultation to get a free 401k review, which is a $1,500 value at no cost to you. All right, let's get into the baseball this weekend, or this Sunday. The Saturday's action did not have the drama of Friday's action, but how could it, right? Friday was a historically crazy day around the SEC. It made me change the whole format of the show yesterday morning. That's how crazy it was. But it was still, an interesting day. We had some surprising results again. The postseason picture continues to get a little bit clearer by the day, and we'll get into all those ramifications. But let's start with the game of the day. And that was Tennessee 7, Vanderbilt 6. I will pull up the box score here, but it is the ninth consecutive win for Tennessee over Vanderbilt, which is crazy, right? I mean, obviously Tennessee's been very, very good the last several years during this 9-game streak, so it's not a surprise from that standpoint necessarily when you look at it that way, but just the idea that any SEC team could beat any other SEC team 9 times in a row is bonkers, right? And of course, this includes 2 series in Nashville. That's the thing. Is 9 games goes back to 2 years ago, which is a series in Nashville. So, and now Tennessee's won this series. Obviously, in the big picture, Tennessee is now tied for the overall SEC lead with Kentucky at 19-7. Vanderbilt falls to 11-15 and is now in a really tough spot where today's game matters a lot, because you go into, if you lose it, you go into next weekend against Kentucky on the road, really needing a result to feel good about your chances as you head to Hoover, chances to be a regional team as you head to Hoover. So Vanderbilt needs it, but this game kind of slipped away from them, honestly. They were in it early. They had Carter Holton on the mound, so even facing Drew Beam, they had to feel pretty good about that matchup. It was back and forth early, as you see here in the line score, but another big inning, that 4-run 6th inning for Tennessee. It was highlighted by as you see here, a Christian Moore 3-run home run. Again, who else but Christian Moore, right? And that kind of ended up doing it. They held on the rest of the way. A run in the 7th ended up being big because Vanderbilt scores a run in the 9th, and Vanderbilt hit the ball hard in the 9th inning. I mean, they some bad luck. Line drive right at Christian Moore with 2 runners on. A line drive to right field that ends up being a sac fly, but had it fallen and potentially looked like it could get into the corner, might have been a walk-off hit for Vanderbilt, right? Or tie the game for Vanderbilt. And instead, Kavares Tears makes the play, and then ultimately they get out of it. Tennessee does to win that game there. Again, just the type of game that from Vanderbilt's standpoint, the type of game that you lose when the team you're playing just has your number. A lot of things went right for Vanderbilt here. Let me scroll down to Carter Holton. He pitched pretty well. Yeah, Carter Holton holds them to 1 earned run, 2 runs total in 5 innings. You can't ask for much more than that against the Tennessee lineup. Pitches better than Drew Beam, all things considered. You put up a decent number of runs of 5 on Drew Beam and 5 in a 3rd innings. I mean, that's pretty good number. And you still end up losing the game. Bullpen continues to be a little bit of an issue for Vanderbilt, and that's probably understating it. Grayson Carter, you see there, a tough day. Ryan Ginther wasn't able to get out untouched, a couple walks there. Lou Guth eventually comes in and settles things down, but getting to that point was just a real struggle for Vanderbilt. So again, big game today for Vanderbilt. They need a result. You can't go into a road series against Kentucky next weekend thinking we have to win this series. Could they? Sure. I mean, they've won a lot of series this year, but you can't go into it needing a result in order to feel good about your at-large chances. Because as we talked about yesterday, it's not just about getting to that magic number of at least 13 regular season SEC wins. It's also, we're looking at a situation where, Florida could be sitting on 13 wins, Alabama maybe 13 wins, LSU, Ole Miss perhaps sitting at around 13 wins. So you can't leave it to the committee to figure out, okay, which of these 5 SEC teams that are sitting on 13 wins, some of whom won a game in Hoover, some of whom didn't, how those stack up. Because ultimately, if you've got 5 teams with 13 regular season wins, and someone will play their way on in Hoover, but let's say you have 4 that are just sitting there that maybe they won a game in Hoover, maybe they didn't. Just Joe's opinion, it's hard to imagine all of those teams getting in to regionals. Like 4 bubble teams from the SEC with similar records, similar resumes. I have to imagine that the committee is going to try to draw a line somewhere in that group. So where you are in that pecking order ends up mattering. All right, let's get to the comments here. Jeremy Scott on Facebook, Roll Tide, rubber game today. Indeed, a big one. Carl Dunn, relatedly, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Carl. Here we are again. LSU needs to win a game 3. Exactly. That's the thing. That's the whole thing about losing that opening game for LSU. Why that error was so impactful. You lose the game, and now LSU's in a situation where they need to win in game 3, and we'll see how it goes. I think they've got a decent shot, because it's not as if Alabama is ever really in great shape on the mound, right? The pitching staff is fairly thin. So if you can get to them, I think you can turn this game into a little bit of an ugly affair, and that might be what LSU needs to win it. We'll see. And yeah, I saw you mentioned Johnny Holstaff is going to be used today. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan on X says, and I know what he means here. It says it's a bad day to be a Candy fan, Joe. I think he means Vandy fan, because Jordan is a Tennessee fan. But from a dental perspective, it's always a bad day to be a candy fan. Not good for your teeth. Although I do love a Snickers bar from time to time. Who doesn't? Not a fruit candy guy though. More of a chocolate candy guy. Used to be a fruit candy guy when I was younger. Can't do it anymore. Josh Woolley on YouTube. It's a little longer, so I'll put this up. Hope the Hogs can win the series today. Getting concerned with the pitching backsliding. Just takes a bad outing or 2 to lose a regional. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I would be concerned as well if I was an Arkansas fan about the pitching backsliding a little bit. Tigert has not been particularly good in SEC play. He's had some good outings, but he hasn't been consistent with it in SEC play. And, Hagen Smith is obviously going to be Hagen Smith. I'm not worried about the fact he gave up 3 runs to State the other day. I think, if that's his bad game, he's in really good shape. But yeah, I mean, Tigert and Molina haven't been as consistent. In the grand scheme of things, they're still very good starting pitchers relative to the level in the SEC, right? Where pitching is just at a premium. But in the bullpen, the McIntyre backslide is concerning, because he was eating up so many innings for Arkansas there in the middle of the season, where it was just like, hey, the jokes about Kevin Kopp's 2.0 were almost too easy, right? Because it's a guy who's throwing a lot of cutters and he's throwing a bunch of innings, and they found other pieces in the bullpen, to Arkansas's credit. It feels like in past years, my personal opinion has been they've narrowed their bullpen too much. This year, it actually feels like they've done a good job of continuing to fold guys in. And so I think that's paid off now, that with McIntyre struggling a little bit, they haven't felt that as acutely, because they've had a bunch of guys they can roll in there. I mean, we'll talk about him in a minute, but like Parker Coyle is kind of like an extra piece. And I think yesterday he honestly was in there to more or less just eat innings, and he shoved. And so that just tells you the level of quality in their bullpen, that like an extra piece like that, which I don't mean that disrespectfully, but every team has those extra pieces in the bullpen. But one of the extra pieces can come in and throw that quality over whatever it was, 3 1/3 innings, tells you what they have in the bullpen. But yeah, Josh, I understand the concern with the pitching backsliding, and regionals are always a tricky deal, right? Just because you're a bad weekend and you're done. If your pitching just for whatever reason doesn't click, you can be in trouble, or the wind is howling out and your pitching staff gives up a couple fly balls that get out of the park that probably shouldn't have, right? Those are high variance events. Okay. Turkey on YouTube asked if I've spoken about Ole Miss yet. I have not, but I will get to it here shortly. So hang tight. We'll certainly get to that. Tennyson Tipton, I was mildly annoyed. Now I'm starting to get a little worried about how good we actually are. I believe Tennyson, a Texas A&M fan. I'm trying to look at the. Yeah, it looks like an Aggie ring there. So yeah, I'm not, but I do think it goes to show that at any given time, the difference between all these teams in this league is pretty narrow, especially when you're dealing with like a team like Ole Miss, where I don't love their talent. I'll just be honest. Like I think it's showing through that they've got talent in spots, but they don't compare to the better teams in the league in terms of that. But you've got a coaching staff that's been together forever, and has been through these battles, and knows how to navigate situations like this. Like I think that's where sometimes coaching can play a role. I think sometimes we overrate the value of coaching. It's mostly how well do the players play, right? But I think that's where coaches who have been together forever and been in place forever can actually be really beneficial. Is they know what's in front of them. They know how to motivate a team. They're able to clearly communicate what needs to happen. And you, if you're A&M and you're just not quite as sharp, you can get got. So yeah. So Tennyson, I think my big picture thought is that A&M is maybe not the juggernaut we thought they were. And because what we always thought their Achilles heel could potentially be has become one, right? With the starting pitching, where Prager is good. Now he's not Hagen Smith good, but he's pretty close. But then the other two guys, you just kind of don't know what you're going to get. And when that happens, it can really throw your game off. So yesterday they get a short start and it just they're on their heels from like the very beginning of the game. And it's just hard to play like that. And then when Ole Miss starts to play add-on, it really got away from them quickly. So understandable that you'd be a little bit worried. I still really like their team. I still really like their balance. And don't forget, by the way, this is actually for all of you. And I respect the other leagues, right? ACC, a very good baseball league. I think Oklahoma's very good in the Big 12. I think there's probably some other Big 12 teams that just have struggled this season that are better than the record show. Like there are good teams everywhere. So I'm not even doing the beating my chest SEC thing. But when you get into a regional, the teams that you are going to face, whatever team I'm talking about, are not going to be. There might be one team in that regional as good as what you've seen in the SEC regular season, but the rest of them won't be. And in the super regional, it's fairly likely, especially if you're A&M and you're probably going to be a national seed, the team you're paired up with in supers is probably not going to be any better than what you saw in SEC play. So sometimes it feels like, man, we're really getting beat up. Man, we're really going through it. But understand, we're at the back end of a grind here of a 10-week SEC schedule with just one more to go. Regionals sometimes can, depending on your draw, right? But they can sometimes feel like a break in some ways. Now they're a pressure cooker, 100%, but sometimes there almost seems to be like a level of relief that like, oh my gosh, we don't have to face a staff. We're not playing Arkansas again with a staff full of guys throwing 95 miles an hour, or we don't have to face Charlie Condon today. Stuff like that. Anyway, I'll get to the rest of these comments here in just a second. Let's get to player of the day. We're back on our regular format today, as you may have noticed. I spoke about the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. Christian Moore is in the mix for player of the day, 3 for 5 with a home run, 5 runs batted in. Right up there. I mean, obviously one of the most productive players in the country, also one of the most clutch players in the country. Like, I'm not sure. There are some guys I'd rather have at the plate. I mean, Condon, probably one of them, Cags, but like Christian Moore's on that short list of guys I'd want my team to have at the plate, needing a big hit late in the game. Luke Heyman for Florida, big win for Florida over Kentucky. Luke Heyman went 2 for 4 with 2 home runs, 3 RBIs. Florida a 10-1 victory over Kentucky. Big game today. Florida needs that series as they head to Athens next weekend, because with the way Georgia is playing, as they finished off a sweep of South Carolina yesterday, with the way Georgia is playing, you don't want to go to Athens needing a result. So big game today for Florida over Kentucky. That starts at 12 noon. It's an early start, so just a heads up there on that game. Also for Florida, Cade Curlin, 2 for 5 with a double and a home run. For South Carolina, in that losing effort against Georgia, 3 for 5. He continues to be a good catalyst to the top of the order for South Carolina. South Carolina now in a tough spot. They are under 500 in conference play. They're 13-14. They went into the weekend thinking like, hey, if they win this home series, and look, they felt pretty equal with Georgia. So I think a lot of people, probably myself included, I actually don't remember if this was part of our D1 staff picks and who I picked, but you just kind of default to the home team in series like that, right? Like that's not crazy. And so South Carolina's thinking, hey, we win the series, like we go into a situation where if we just get one in Knoxville last weekend, like we're in good shape to host. Well, instead they get swept, and now they're in a situation where if they get swept in Knoxville, which is on the table, given how good Tennessee is, and Tennessee likely will be playing for an SEC title, they're in a situation where they could be on the wrong side of the bubble. And it comes down to how well do you play in Hoover, and then where do you stack up with those other 13, 14 win teams in the SEC that are going to be on the bubble ultimately. So that's a really tough turn of events there for South Carolina over the weekend. The pitching continues to be the issue. They just really struggled to find, especially once they got to the bullpen, struggled to find guys that could slow down Georgia's offense, which is a problem a lot of teams have had this season. But it was a particular problem this past weekend where Georgia scored double-digit runs in every single game of the weekend. So hard to win games when the opponent's putting up 10-plus runs every single time out. On the Georgia side of that game, Logan Jordan, one at bat, grand slam. That's efficiency, folks. Pinch hit at bat. They pinch hit him late in the game for Dylan Goldstein because Georgia wanted to get out of a left on left, so they pinch hit with Logan Jordan from the right side. South Carolina goes to the bullpen to get a right-hander. He was Connor McCreary, and Logan Jordan hits a grand slam, puts Georgia on top. And they ran away with it from that point, ended up winning 14-6, but it was a 6-6 game at that time. I think his grand slam made it 10-6, if I remember correctly. And Georgia ends up running away with it. Just kind of a backbreaker, honestly. But Logan Jordan, efficient, 1 of 1. Trey Phelps continues to swing the bat incredibly well. This guy's going to be a superstar, folks. He's already a very good player. Missed some time with a kneecap injury is kind of what I gather earlier in the season, but he's back now. 2 for 4, double, home run, 3 runs scored. For Ole Miss, how about this? Eli Birch, 2 for 2 with 2 walks, got on base all 4 times. We will talk about Ole Miss's pitching here in just a second when we talk pitcher of the day, because I think that was actually the more important piece of the puzzle. But Ole Miss also did score 10 runs. They got a little something from everybody. This wasn't a situation where one guy went off and drove in 7 of the 10 or what have you. They got a pretty good team offensive effort. But Eli Birch, a guy who's had a tough year in some regards defensively and coming up at the bat, but 2 for 2 with 2 walks, got on base 4 times. I mean, that's a really good day at the plate on a day when Ole Miss really needed it. Vahiva Aloy for Arkansas in a losing effort against Mississippi State, 3 for 5, 2 doubles. And then our player of the day, though, this is a good segue. Player of the day is Dakota Jordan for Mississippi State, 3 for 4, a double, a home run, 3 runs batted in, as Mississippi State wins 8-5, which sets up a rubber match today between the two this afternoon. I think it's a 3 Eastern start. Big one there. Arkansas, obviously, to keep pace with Tennessee and Kentucky. They are now a game back at 18-8. So there's that element of this. And for State, I think there's maybe even almost certainly actually more at play. They're now at 15 SEC wins. Winning today would sew up, I think, hosting going into next weekend with a series against Missouri where, even if you win today, even if you win the Missouri series, not even sweep, you feel like, hey, we're in the mix to be a national seed. And certainly if you win today and then sweep Missouri, you're basically a lock, it would seem. Now, obviously, caveat, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to see how the bracket comes out. Every year is a new bracket, for better or worse. So, but State's in a really good position where you win today and they're feeling really, really good. Now, on the flip side, to Josh Willie's concerns, if Arkansas doesn't win this game, and now it really feels like they're really on a backslide, the worry at Arkansas is not going to abate, if you will. And I think that's been there all year. I heard a lot of I think this is just built in, given that Arkansas, the history of the program, right, as consistent as any team in the SEC over the last, since 2016 when they bottomed out. So the last 7 years, they've been as consistent in the regular season as any team. Plenty of Omaha trips. Obviously, the ghosts of 2018 are very much alive. And because of that, I think there's this general nervousness. When I was in Fayetteville earlier this season, I heard that from a lot of fans of like, feel really good about this year, but I'm trying not to get too excited. And I get that. But losing this game, I think would only, for those people who are inclined to feel that way, I think losing this series would be a little more fuel for that, even as good as Arkansas has been all season, the fact that they're staring in the face of a national seed and so on and so forth. But Dakota Jordan, player of the day, he continues to be excellent for the Bulldogs. Grab a sip of water before I get into these comments. Fighting the clearing the throat today. I try not to spend the entire time clearing my throat while I'm talking to you guys, but sometimes it, you know how it goes. In the morning when you've not done a lot of talking, sometimes that happens. Sam Smith, I have to feel like this is sarcastic on YouTube. Sad for Tim Corbin, such a likable guy. I have to imagine that's sarcastic, Sam. I hear you. Guy takes losing hard. He does. He's he's kind of got the underspoken, quiet philosopher thing going for him, but he might take losing harder than any head coach in the SEC. So definitely passionate when it comes to that. Off topic, but I'm with you, Carl. Paul Skeens had a good debut. Still got that 100 plus going. Yeah, Paul Skeens debuted less than a year after pitching at LSU. Side note: I wonder if Hagen Smith will be on a similar trajectory once he gets into a minor league system. But good debut for Paul Skeens. It will only get better from here. Big league debuts are tricky. It's also a weird day. Weird day in Pittsburgh yesterday where it looked like the game might get moved back, and then it was just a rainy day where there was a lot of kind of like conjecture about what was going to happen, and so it probably wasn't the easiest day to make an MLB debut, but the stuff looked exactly as we all remember, right? Jay Johnson in his in-game interview, I think last night, was updated on Paul Skeens' outing and laughed or something about almost 2 strikeouts per inning. Those I miss those days, or something like just something like that, something lighthearted, a good sense of humor. Jay Johnson. Cameron Vaughn says Rebs looked good again yesterday. They sure did. They win one today. Let's see. Let me make sure I have my numbers right, because now they're all running together. 11 wins. You win one today. You're looking at 12. That would put you clear ahead of LSU, even if LSU wins today, going into that series in Baton Rouge next weekend. So again, I keep harping on it, but the pecking order is important. And having that head-to-head next weekend against LSU could be a trump card, as would be finishing higher in the overall SEC standings. James Gillum on YouTube. This is a longer one, so I'll put it up here. Joe, I've never been a Fire Kingston guy, but I feel like unless CWS, he's probably gone. Going into the season with Jones, SQ, and Kimball as weekend guys, feel like it might cost him his job. So caveat, don't have any inside information on this one. This is not any sort of reporting. This is just me reacting to your comment, James. This weekend was not good for the optics of that. There was as those games slipped away, I wasn't there for yesterday's, but I was there for the first two. But they all kind of followed like a pattern in that South Carolina was spunky early, and then Georgia just like kind of boat races. And then, in the first game, Carolina made a little bit of a comeback, but never could quite come all the way back. And so in all 3 games, the air just came out of the balloon in the stadium. So I think there's just a lot of negativity. Now, look, you go win a series in Knoxville, I think it helps. But however, I don't know that it helps so much that that it makes it to where the postseason result is not the most important thing. So I guess let me clarify that, because I stumbled over my words there. Winning that series in Knoxville next weekend to ensure that Carolina gets into a regional, I don't think that's going to be enough to satisfy those folks who were kind of disenfranchised by what happened this weekend, right? That's going to come down, changing people's minds who think they should move on from Kingston is going to come down to what they do in the postseason. Whatever the regular season result is from this point forward is not going to be enough, I don't think. That's just my opinion on it. So that'll be, we were looking at a situation where there was really not a lot of heat in the SEC because State's obviously been better this year, and Ole Miss is making a run now. But there's some tension there at South Carolina, just given the way the weekend went, and you can understand that. All right, let's talk about pitcher of the day here. Carter Holton. We talked about him early on in the show. 5 innings pitched, gave up just the 1 earned run. Liam Peterson. How about this? A best outing of the year for Liam Peterson, who really struggled early in the season as a freshman. 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 run allowed against Kentucky in that 10-1 win. Man, would it be huge for Florida? Now, if they end up missing a regional, it'll kind of be like, well, it was too little and too late. But man, if Florida can find their way into the postseason, if this is a hint at what Liam Peterson is ready to become, like suddenly Florida is a lot more dangerous as a team if you've got somebody like that in their rotation, because that's been such an issue for them. Luke Holman in a tough game, not just because it's Alabama on the road, but also given that he transferred from Alabama, that had to be a tough spot for him. Pitched well, 5 2/3 innings, 1 earned run allowed. I mentioned Parker Coyle for Arkansas. He gave them a chance to come back in that game. They didn't ultimately, but his 3 1/3 scoreless kept them in that game and gave them a fighting chance there. And for a guy who hasn't had a lot of great outings this season, first kudos to Arkansas. They keep running him out there because he's got a good arm. Pitched well in the Cape Cod League too. But this is a big outing for him. Perhaps that gets him going in the right direction. But in the small scale yesterday, kept them in the game. But the pitcher today is Liam Doyle. It was a big day for Liam's on the mound between Peterson and Doyle. But Liam Doyle against Texas A&M, 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 run, no walks, 7 strikeouts. The no walks part, a big part of that when sometimes Liam Doyle will have outings where he strikes out a bunch of guys, but he'll struggle a little bit with walks. But did not do that yesterday against Texas A&M and leads Ole Miss to a win that clinches the series. Like I said earlier, big win today, man. If you can sweep Texas A&M, if you're Ole Miss, you're in pretty good shape going into that last weekend of the season to at least get yourself on to the bubble, into the conversation. All right. Do we have any comments here? Cameron Vaughn says, any thoughts about Bianco either way? Again, just Joe's opinion. I think any movement on Bianco would have to be a retirement, and I think that's what he deserves. I understand the last couple of years have not gone well, and you can make an argument that they lose one more game in 2022. Actually, I don't even think you can make the argument, just given where they got into the field. They lose one more game in 2022. They don't make the postseason. They don't go on that run. They don't win the national title. But they did, right? They win a national title. And I think for those who are, and I'm not saying this to you directly, Cameron, I'm just saying to any of the viewers here, like, go look at the history of Ole Miss baseball. I mean, Mike Bianco pretty much is Ole Miss baseball in terms of success for that program. So if there's any movement on Bianco, it's a retirement, because I think he's earned that. Like, I know that sometimes you get into situations where coaches who maybe hung on a little too long or didn't have a succession plan or whatever have harmed programs. But A, I don't think we're there with Ole Miss. And then B, I just think he built that program basically from the ground up. Has had a lot of success there over 20 plus years at this point. So it's his decision to make. And we'll have to see. So if there is movement there, I think it's going to be Bianco's decision. I think it'll be a retirement rather than him getting pushed out. The last 2 seasons haven't been up to expectations, but he's bought himself the right to make that decision himself based on what he's accomplished, not just a national title, but also 20 years of getting that program from basically nowhere to honestly, over the last 20 years, being one of the most consistent programs in the SEC. I mean, think about how many teams have ebbed and flowed over the time Ole Miss has been good, which is since he's been there, essentially. It's Tennessee went through that whole time of not being a very good program. Tim Corbin was just arriving at Vanderbilt around the same time Bianco was, and their program was nowhere before that, right? Mississippi State has been a lot more inconsistent than Ole Miss has been under Bianco. Florida went through some fallow years before Sully got there. So we can go on and on and on and on, and yet Ole Miss has typically until the last couple of years has typically been right there. When they've missed regionals before, but it's always been a close miss. More often than not, they're in the hosting conversation than they are in the bubble conversation, and I think that's a testament to what they've built there. But a good question, Cameron. Gave me a chance to kind of clarify my thoughts there. I think again, if Bianco is out, it's because he decided it is time to do something else with his time. And yeah, Carl Dunn mentions love Coach Bianco. He learned from the best, Skip Bertman. That is true. A Skip Bertman disciple there, and that's a healthy coaching tree, the Skip Bertman tree for sure. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, wrapping up Saturday's action. Let's have a good Sunday, why don't we? 6 games on the docket, a lot of important games around there. I guess I forgot to give you a game of the day. I'll give you 2 as a little bonus, as an apology for forgetting to get to it. Kentucky and Florida, we talked about the impact there for Florida. Kentucky also gunning for that SEC regular season title. And then LSU, Alabama. The stakes there are pretty clear. Those are both teams trying to get onto the bubble and onto the right side of the bubble. The result today will be important for that. I kind of expect an ugly game, and I mean that in a potentially fun way, but you know how some of those SEC Sunday games go where it's just scratch and claw and both teams use 6 pitchers or something. Like, this could be that type of game. We will obviously have to see, but big games all around in the SEC. Every game on the docket today has some meaning one way or the other, and that's a beautiful thing when we get to this time of year when every game has a little bit of meaning. So enjoy the games. I hope the weather is as nice where you are as it is here where I am as I look out my window, and that you enjoy the baseball. I will talk to you next Thursday. Programming note, 4 episodes of Weekend Waypoints next weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because all the series start on Thursday in anticipation of Hoover starting early the following week. And a reminder, live stream preview show of the SEC tournament, Monday, May 20th, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central. Mark and I will be on to preview the SEC tournament, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Central. Maybe some guests along the way. Bring your questions. We'll do some Q&A. Looking forward to it. Think it'll be a whole lot of fun. So join me next Thursday, and look forward to joining me on Monday, May 20th. Enjoy the baseball, everyone. I'll talk to you next week.